The unexpected specialist. The Galactic Research Institute of Quantum Mechanics towered above the artificial horizon of Europa Station, its crystalline spires reflecting the distant sunlight in prismatic patterns. Inside the facility's main conference chamber, Chief Researcher Zixtal's primary sensory appendages twitched with barely contained frustration as he addressed the assembled board of directors. "We've tried everything within standard protocols," the Arxian scientist's translator hummed. "The quantum entanglement matrix simply won't stabilize beyond 47% efficiency. At this rate, the Trans-Dimensional Communications Project will fail to meet even our most conservative expectations." Around the hovering conference table, representatives from 12 different species shifted uncomfortably. The project had consumed nearly 30 billion credits over the past 3 cycles, and failure would mean more than just lost resources. It would represent the first major setback in the Institute's 1,000-year history. Director Naivos, her bioluminescent patches pulsing a concerned yellow-green, leaned forward. "Surely our best minds can find a solution. We have the foremost experts from every major spacefaring civilization." "Every civilization except one," came a quiet voice from the far end of the table. All eyes, optical sensors, and sensory organs turned toward Dr. Miralan, the facility's head of Xenological Studies. Her crystalline form sparkled as she continued. "We have no humans on our research team." The chamber erupted in overlapping frequencies of protest. Humans were the newest members of the Galactic Alliance, barely 2 centuries into space travel. Their scientific methods were considered crude, unpredictable, and dangerously informal by most established species. "I assume you have a specific human in mind?" Zixtal asked, his tone carrying the distinctive harmonics of skepticism. "Sarah Chen. She's currently stationed at the Europa Engineering Corps. Her work on chaos-based computing systems is unorthodox, but her results are undeniable." The conference chamber's AI projected a hologram of Sarah's credentials. Multiple species made their various gestures of surprise as they reviewed her accomplishments. Despite her young age, barely 40 Earth years, she had solved 3 supposedly impossible engineering challenges in the past 5 years alone. "Her methods are completely outside standard procedures," one of the directors noted, their tentacles wrapping tightly around themselves in discomfort. "Exactly," Miralan responded. "And perhaps that's exactly what we need." 2 days later, Sarah Chen stood in the Institute's main quantum lab, her dark eyes taking in the massive array of equipment with unconcealed wonder. At 5'6", she was dwarfed by most of the alien scientists, but there was something in her posture that made her seem larger than her physical form. "The quantum matrix is through here," Zixtal said, leading her toward the central chamber. "Though I must insist you follow our established safety protocols to the letter. We can't risk any human improvisations." Sarah nodded, but her attention was already focused on the holographic readouts floating above the main control panel. Her fingers danced through the air, manipulating the data streams with a fluidity that made several of the observing scientists exchange worried glances. "These efficiency calculations," she said, more to herself than anyone else, "they're based on standard quantum coherence models, aren't they?" "Of course," Zixtal replied. "The same models that have served us successfully for centuries." Sarah's lips curved into a slight smile. "But you're not working with standard quantum states here. You're trying to establish stable communications across dimensional boundaries. What if the inefficiency isn't a flaw in the system, but a feature?" "I don't understand." "In human music, we have something called resonance. Sometimes, what seems like interference is actually a harmony waiting to be discovered." She turned to face the alien scientists. "Your models assume perfect quantum coherence is the goal, but what if the solution requires controlled chaos?" The next 6 hours were a blur of calculations, heated debates, and increasingly complex simulations. Sarah's approach violated at least 15 established principles of quantum engineering. But as the numbers began to align, even the most skeptical observers fell silent. "It's impossible," Zixtal whispered, all 4 of his appendages trembling as he reviewed the results. By introducing controlled quantum chaos at exactly the right frequencies, we could potentially achieve 89% efficiency. But no one has ever. The calculations alone would be impossible for a computer, Sarah agreed, but perfect for a human intuition combined with machine precision. She gestured to the modified control systems she had been programming. We're good at seeing patterns in chaos. It's how we survived on Earth long enough to reach the stars. Director Naivas, who had been silently observing from the background, stepped forward. Her bioluminescence had shifted to a deep blue of profound interest. You realize what you're proposing goes against millennia of established quantum theory. Sarah met the alien director's compound eye steadily. With respect, Director, sometimes the best way forward is to question what we think we know. Humans learned that lesson the hard way, through countless failures and reimaginings. It's not just our technology that evolved, it's our way of thinking. As the day shift faded into night and the first preliminary tests began, something shifted in the atmosphere of the lab. The alien scientists watched in mounting amazement as their readings began to show stability patterns they had never thought possible. Sarah moved between the control stations with a dancer's grace, making micro-adjustments based on what she called gut feeling, a concept that both horrified and fascinated her alien colleagues. And in the quantum matrix chamber, for the first time in 3 years of attempts, the dimensional barriers began to thin in exactly the way the project had originally envisioned. It was just the beginning, but as Sarah Chen stood before the shimmering quantum field, she knew she was watching more than just a scientific breakthrough. This was the moment when humanity proved it had something unique to offer to the galaxy, not just technology or resources, but a fundamentally different way of seeing the universe itself. Behind her, she heard Zixtel quietly updating his research logs. Day 1 of human integration into Project Quantum Bridge. Initial results, exceeding all known parameters. Further study of human cognitive methods may be warranted. Sarah smiled. They had no idea what they were in for. Breaking protocol. You can't be serious. Zixtel's translator struggled to convey the mixture of horror and disbelief in his voice. Deliberately introducing quantum fluctuations into the containment field. It's beyond reckless. It's suicide. Sarah Chen stood her ground before the holographic simulation, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, eyes bright with the kind of enthusiasm that made her alien colleagues deeply uncomfortable. 3 weeks into the project, she'd learned to recognize the subtle signs of distress in various species, the way Zixtel's appendages coiled tightly, how the crystalline Dr. Maryland's facets dulled slightly, the rapid color shifts in Director Naivas's bioluminescent patches. Look at the data, Sarah insisted, expanding the 3-dimensional model with a gesture. The system isn't failing because of too much chaos. It's failing because we're fighting too hard against it. Sometimes you have to bend with the wind instead of building a stronger wall. Poetic metaphors are not accepted scientific methodology. One of the junior researchers chittered from their hovering work platform. No, Sarah agreed, but they help us think about problems differently. Watch this. Her fingers danced through the holographic controls, implementing changes that made several safety systems blare warnings. If we treat the quantum fluctuations like waves instead of errors, we can. A sudden tremor ran through the facility, cutting her off. The main quantum matrix flared with unexpected energy, its containment field struggling against an unforeseen surge. Emergency protocols initiated, the facility's AI announced. All personnel clear the testing chamber. Standard containment procedures in effect. Sarah watched as her alien colleagues moved with practiced efficiency, each taking their designated emergency stations. The protocols were perfect, precise, and she realized with growing certainty, completely inadequate for what was actually happening. The surge is creating a feedback loop, she called out, already moving toward the main control panel. The safety systems are making it worse. Step away from the controls, Zixtel ordered. Emergency protocols must be followed exactly. The protocols assume the quantum matrix is behaving according to standard models. Sarah interrupted, her fingers flying over the controls. But look at these patterns. It's not just random chaos. There's a structure to it, like a storm system, or you are not authorized to override safety protocols. Director Naivas's voice cut through the rising alarm sounds, her bioluminescence now a harsh red of warning. Sarah made her choice. In one swift motion, she pulled her emergency override card, given to her reluctantly upon joining the project, and slammed it into the control panel. Then fire me later, but right now we need to work with this energy, not against it. The next 3 minutes were a blur of action that would later fill dozens of investigation reports and become the subject of heated debate in scientific circles across the galaxy. Sarah's fingers moved across the controls in what appeared to be random patterns, but each adjustment seemed to anticipate the quantum matrix's next fluctuation. Impossible, Dr. Miraland whispered, her crystalline form vibrating in harmony with the energy pulses. She's surfing the quantum waves. Indeed, rather than trying to forcefully contain the surge, Sarah was directing it, letting it flow through carefully calculated paths that gradually bled off its excess energy. It was like watching someone conduct an orchestra of chaos, finding harmony in what should have been pure destruction. The emergency lights faded, replaced by the normal soft illumination of the lab. The quantum matrix hummed at a stable frequency that, according to every instrument in the facility, should have been impossible to achieve. How? Zixtal's translator seemed to struggle with the concept. How did you know which patterns to use? Sarah wiped sweat from her forehead, her hands finally still. I didn't, exactly. But humans have been studying chaos patterns since we first watched storms form over our oceans. Sometimes understanding comes from observation rather than pure theory. Our brains are good at recognizing patterns, even if we can't always explain why we recognize them. Director Naivas floated forward, her colors shifting through a complex range of emotions. What you did was in direct violation of at least 7 major safety protocols. Yes, Sarah admitted, and I'm prepared to accept the consequences. But first, you might want to look at the efficiency readings of the quantum matrix. The room fell silent as the numbers appeared on the main display. 92% efficiency, nearly double what they had achieved before, and well beyond what traditional models said was possible. This will need to be thoroughly documented, Dr. Miraland said finally. Every action, every decision point. We need to understand how human intuition interfaced with quantum mechanics at such a fundamental level. Agreed. Director Naivas's colors had settled into a deep purple of contemplation. And we need to reassess our emergency protocols. Perhaps there is room for some flexibility in our procedures. Sarah hid a smile as she began compiling her notes. The next few days would be filled with debriefings, explanations, and probably more than a few heated arguments about methodology. But something had shifted in the lab's atmosphere. She caught several of the junior researchers looking at their instruments with new eyes, asking questions that would have been considered ridiculous just days before. As she worked, she heard Zixtal making another log entry, Day 22 of human integration. Traditional protocols proved insufficient for quantum surge event. Human adaptive response strategies demonstrated unexpected effectiveness. Recommendation: immediate review and potential revision of standard emergency procedures to incorporate intuitive response options. He paused, all 4 appendages moving in what Sarah had learned was a gesture of reluctant admission. Additional note: Human Chen's violation of protocols, while technically unacceptable, may have prevented catastrophic containment failure. Further study of human risk assessment and adaptive response mechanisms strongly advised. Sarah pulled up the quantum matrix readings from during the crisis. There, in the chaos of the energy surge, she could see patterns that reminded her of weather systems, of crowd movements, of all the natural phenomena humans had spent millennia learning to read. The galaxy might run on precise mathematical models, but nature, even quantum nature, sometimes required a different kind of understanding. She had a feeling this wouldn't be the last time human intuition would clash with alien protocols. But maybe, just maybe, they were all starting to learn that progress sometimes required a leap into controlled chaos. The crisis. The warning came at 300 station time, when most of the facility's day shift was asleep. Sarah Chen wasn't. She'd developed a habit of running simulations during the quiet hours, when she could think without the weight of a dozen different species' expectations pressing against her. The first alert was subtle, a minor fluctuation in the quantum matrix's containment field. Then another, and another, each tiny ripple building on the last, creating a cascade that the facility's AI flagged as anomalous but within acceptable parameters. Sarah knew better. She'd learned to read these patterns like a sailor reads the sky before a storm. Computer, wake Dr. Miralan and Zixtal. Priority alert. By the time her colleagues arrived, the quantum matrix chamber's displays had transformed into a symphony of warning indicators. The crystalline structure of Dr. Miralan flickered with anxiety as she absorbed the readings. "This is unprecedented," she chimed, her natural resonance frequencies disturbed by concern. "The quantum fields are folding in on themselves." Zixtal moved quickly to the main control panel, his appendages working multiple interfaces simultaneously, implementing standard containment protocols. "Wait," Sarah called out, but it was too late. The moment the containment fields increased in strength, the quantum fluctuations doubled in intensity. "Damn it, we're making it worse." "Impossible," Zixtal insisted, though his translator couldn't hide the tremor in his harmonics. "The protocols are designed to handle normal quantum behavior," Sarah interrupted, her fingers flying over her own console. "But look at these patterns. The fields aren't just unstable, they're evolving." The chamber's main display showed a three-dimensional representation of the quantum matrix. What should have been organized lines of force had become a writhing mass of energy, twisting in ways that defied standard physical models. Director Nivas arrived as the first physical tremors began to shake the facility. Her bioluminescence pulsed rapid patterns of alarm as she assessed the situation. "Full evacuation protocols. Now, if we evacuate, we lose the matrix," Sarah argued, her mind racing through possibilities. "And if it collapses completely?" "The facility is equipped with emergency containment measures," one of the senior researchers cut in. "Which won't work," Sarah insisted. "This isn't just a containment breach waiting to happen. The quantum fields are creating new connection points across dimensional boundaries. If they collapse chaotically, the energy release could tear a hole in space-time itself." The chamber fell silent except for the growing whine of overtaxed systems. Sarah could see the conflict playing out in her colleagues' reactions. Their training demanded they follow established procedures, but those same procedures were actively making the situation worse. "I have an idea," she said into the silence. "But you're not going to like it." Director Nivas's colors shifted to a deep indigo of grave concern. "Explain." "We need to invert our approach completely. Instead of fighting the quantum field evolution, we need to accelerate it." Absolute madness. Zixtal exploded, his appendages writhing in distress. The energy levels would reach a critical point. Sarah finished. "Yes, but like a star-going supernova, we can shape how that energy is released." Her fingers sketched patterns in the air as she explained. "If we carefully destabilize certain points in the field while reinforcing others, we can create a controlled cascade failure." "Controlled cascade failure is a contradiction in terms," Dr. Miralan observed, though her crystalline structure had taken on the resonance pattern that Sarah had learned meant deep thought. "Look at these patterns," Sarah insisted, pulling up her late-night simulations. "They're not random. The quantum fields are trying to establish a new kind of stability, but our containment systems keep forcing them back into old patterns. It's like," she searched for an analogy they might understand, "like trying to force a butterfly back into its chrysalis." Another tremor rocked the facility, stronger this time. Warning klaxons began to sound throughout the complex. "We have perhaps 10 minutes before total system failure," Zixtal announced grimly. "Standard protocols indicate." "Forget standard protocols," Director Nivas interrupted, her colors now pulsing with decisive patterns. "They have already failed us. Sarah Chen, you have 5 minutes to convince me your plan has any chance of success." Sarah's fingers flew across the controls, pulling up simulation after simulation. "The quantum fields are seeking equilibrium, but not the kind we're familiar with. See these resonance patterns? They're similar to what we saw during the surge event, but on a massive scale, if we can guide them instead of fighting them." As she explained, she could see understanding dawning in her colleagues' various sensory organs. The math was solid, even if the approach defied centuries of established practice. They didn't have to like it, but they couldn't deny the logic. "Even if this works," Dr. Miralan noted, "the energy release could damage critical systems. The risk to the facility is less than the risk of a catastrophic dimensional breach." Sarah finished. "We need to decide now." Director Nivas's bioluminescence stabilized into the clear, steady glow that indicated a final decision. "Do it." "But Sarah," her compound eyes fixed on the human engineer, "if this fails." "I know." Sarah nodded, her hands already moving to implement the first phase of her plan. "Believe me, I know." As emergency sirens blared and evacuation orders echoed through the facility, Sarah Chen began the most dangerous experiment of her career. With her alien colleagues providing support, she prepared to either save the facility or tear open the fabric of space-time. And somewhere in the quantum matrix, forces that had never been meant to interact began to dance to a very human tune. Impossible odds. Time seemed to compress as Sarah's fingers danced across the quantum matrix controls. Each adjustment had to be perfect. Too much power to one sector would create a runaway reaction. Too little would allow the dimensional instabilities to grow unchecked. She worked with the focused intensity of a surgeon, or perhaps more accurately, a bomb disposal expert. "Energy levels in Sector 7 approaching critical," Zixtal reported, his usually precise movements now sharp with tension. "The containment fields." "Let them fail," Sarah commanded, not taking her eyes off the holographic display. "We need to give the quantum fields room to expand in that direction. Dr. Miralan, prepare to reinforce Sector 4 when I give the signal." The crystalline scientist hummed an acknowledgement, her structure resonating with the growing energy waves. Most of the facility had been evacuated, leaving only their core team to attempt Sarah's desperate gambit. Through the observation windows, they could see the quantum matrix itself, no longer the orderly pattern of light it had been, but a writhing mass of energy that seemed to bend the very space around it. Standard models predict total system failure in 3 minutes, the facility's AI announced with artificial calm. Sarah allowed herself a grim smile. Good thing we're not playing by standard models anymore. She completed another sequence of adjustments, watching as the quantum fields responded. "Director, I need full power to the auxiliary generators." Director Nivas's bioluminescence flickered with concern. "That would exceed all safety parameters. The stress on the system will be massive," Sarah finished. "But we need that power spike to catalyze the field transformation. Trust me." Those 2 words, "trust me," hung in the air for a moment. Sarah was asking them to put aside not just their protocols, but centuries of established scientific doctrine. She was asking them to believe that human intuition could grasp something their advanced civilizations had missed. The director's colors shifted to a deep, resolved purple, engaging auxiliary power. The chamber hummed with energy as Sarah began the final phase of her plan. On her main display, the quantum field patterns twisted and danced, forming configurations that the facility's computers couldn't even classify. Warning messages cascaded across secondary screens, each one predicting imminent disaster. "Sarah," Dr. Miralan's harmonic voice carried an edge of worry. "The field integrity is—" "I see it," Sarah interrupted, her hands never stopping their precise movements. "It's supposed to do that. Watch the resonance patterns. Indeed, beneath the apparent chaos, new structures were emerging. The quantum fields weren't collapsing. They were reorganizing themselves into something entirely new. Sarah's adjustments weren't controlling this process so much as guiding it, like a gardener training a vine to grow along a trellis. Suddenly, multiple alarms screamed to life. The quantum matrix flared with impossible brightness, forcing everyone except Dr. Miraland to shield their visual organs. The facility's structure groaned under forces it was never designed to contain. Primary containment failing. Zixtal's translator could barely be heard over the chaos. Secondary systems offline. "We need to hold position," Sarah shouted. Her console was showing readings that shouldn't have been possible, energy patterns that defied known physics. But in those patterns, she saw something familiar, something that reminded her of weather systems, of fluid dynamics, of the complex but natural flow of forces that humans had studied since they first looked up at the stars. 30 seconds to critical threshold, the AI announced. Sarah's fingers flew faster, making microscopic adjustments based on instincts she couldn't even explain. She wasn't following any known protocol now. She was improvising, like a jazz musician riffing off an impossible melody. 20 seconds. Director Naivas's bioluminescence had become almost blinding, reflecting the stress of the moment. "Sarah Chen, if you're going to do something." "Not yet." Sarah's voice was tight with concentration. "The fields need to align just a little more." 10 seconds. The quantum matrix was now a maelstrom of energy, twisting reality itself into new shapes. Warning systems were failing faster than the AI could report them. The chamber's reinforced walls creaked under dimensional stresses they were never meant to endure. 5 seconds. There, Sarah's hands slammed down on the final sequence of commands. "Dr. Miralan. Sector 4. Now." The crystalline scientist channeled power through her sector, just as Sarah's commands took effect. For one terrible moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, like a wave breaking on a beach, the chaos resolved itself into perfect, impossible order. The quantum fields didn't so much stabilize as transcend, forming structures that rippled with controlled power. Warning alarms fell silent one by one, replaced by the soft hum of systems finding a new equilibrium. "Quantum matrix stabilizing," the AI reported, a note of what almost sounded like surprise in its artificial voice. "Field coherence at 115% of theoretical maximum." Sarah sagged against her console, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Around the chamber, her alien colleagues stared at readings that, according to everything they knew, shouldn't have been possible. "How?" Zixtal finally asked, all 4 appendages trembling slightly. "The energy patterns, the field configurations, none of it follows established principles." "No," Sarah agreed, straightening up with effort. "It follows natural principles instead. Sometimes the universe doesn't care about our established theories. Sometimes you have to listen to what it's trying to tell you." Director Naivas floated closer, her colors shifting through patterns Sarah had never seen before. "You took an impossible situation, violated every safety protocol we had, and created something entirely new." "That's kind of what humans do," Sarah replied with a tired smile. "We look at the impossible and think, I wonder what happens if." Dr. Miraland's crystalline form sparkled with new frequencies as she studied the stabilized quantum matrix. "The power readings, the field configurations, this isn't just a containment solution. I believe we may have accidentally invented an entirely new form of quantum engineering." Sarah looked at the beautiful, impossible patterns flowing through the quantum matrix. "Not accidentally," she corrected gently. "We just had to be willing to try something that everyone knew wouldn't work." As the facility's systems settled into their new configuration, Sarah could see the impact of what they'd achieved slowly dawning on her colleagues. They hadn't just solved a crisis, they'd broken through centuries of scientific dogma to discover something revolutionary. And it had happened because they'd been willing to trust a human who saw patterns in chaos and possibility in disaster. Legacy. 3 months after the quantum matrix crisis, Sarah Chen stood before the Galactic Scientific Council, facing an audience of the most distinguished researchers from 100 different species. The chamber's vast architecture made her feel smaller than usual, but her voice remained steady as she concluded her presentation. In summary, what we discovered wasn't just a new way to stabilize quantum fields, she said, gesturing to the holographic models floating above the chamber center. We found an entirely new paradigm for understanding how reality behaves at the quantum level. The universe, it turns out, doesn't always follow our rulebooks. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of various species versions of discussion. Sarah caught fragments of debate in a dozen different languages, their translators struggling to keep up with the technical terminology being thrown around. Director Naivas, now serving as her primary advocate before the council, floated forward. Her bioluminescence pulsed with what Sarah had learned to recognize as pride. The data is irrefutable, the director announced. The Chen matrix configuration, as we've termed it, demonstrates efficiency levels that exceed our previous theoretical limits by 47%. More importantly, it has remained stable for 3 standard months, proving this is not a temporary anomaly. A Varaxian council member raised several of their sensory stocks, but the methodology used to achieve this breakthrough. Their translator conveyed both skepticism and reluctant fascination. It defies centuries of established procedure. Yes, Dr. Miralan chimed in, her crystalline form resonating with excitement. That is precisely why it worked. We had become so focused on following established theories that we failed to see when nature itself was showing us something new. Zixtel, who had become one of Sarah's strongest supporters after the crisis, activated his own presentation segment. We have spent the past 3 months documenting every aspect of the human intuitive process that led to this discovery. While we cannot yet fully quantify how human Chen recognized these patterns, we can verify that her approach opens up entirely new avenues of research. Sarah watched as her former critics became her defenders, each adding their own perspective on how human insight had transformed their understanding of quantum mechanics. But it was what happened next that truly surprised her. A Sentinel Class A representative, their holographic form shimmering with complexity, addressed the chamber. We have analyzed the decision-making patterns demonstrated during the crisis. The human ability to recognize complex patterns within chaos, combined with their capacity to act decisively on incomplete information, represents a cognitive framework that even our most advanced neural networks cannot fully replicate. The chamber fell silent. Praise from a Sentinel Class A was rare enough to be historic. This is why. Director Naivas continued into the silence, her colors shifting through confident patterns. We are proposing the establishment of the Human Intuitive Sciences Division within the Institute, not just for quantum research, but for all fields where standard analytical approaches have reached their limits. Sarah had known this proposal was coming, but the reaction it generated still took her breath away. The chamber erupted again, but this time the tone was different. Excited rather than skeptical, curious rather than concerned. A hegemony core mind, its massive form dominating one section of the chamber, pulsed with approval. For too long, we have viewed human unpredictability as a weakness. Perhaps it is time we recognized it as an essential complement to our own methodologies. As the council began formal deliberations on the proposal, Sarah found herself in the chamber's observation dome with her original team. Through the transparent ceiling, Europa Station's artificial sky painted everything in soft blues and silvers. Did you ever imagine this would be the result when you first arrived? Dr. Miralan asked, her crystalline form reflecting the starlight. Sarah smiled, watching distant ships move through their precise traffic patterns. Honestly, I was just hoping not to get fired for breaking too many protocols. Instead, you have helped us break free of limitations we did not even know we had, Zixtal observed. His translator now carried tones of warmth when he addressed her. Though I still cannot fully approve of your methods. That's the point, Sarah said, turning to face her colleagues, her friends. We all have different ways of seeing the universe. Humans don't have better answers than anyone else. We just ask different questions. Director Naivas's bioluminescence created dancing patterns on the dome's surface. Questions that have already led to 3 new research initiatives based on your approach. The quantum communication breakthrough was just the beginning. Sarah nodded, thinking about the messages she'd received from other humans working throughout the galaxy. Her success had opened doors for them, creating opportunities for human insight to be valued rather than merely tolerated. You know what the best part is, she said, gesturing to where teams of mixed species were already gathering to discuss new projects. We're finally learning how to combine our strengths: alien precision and human intuition, eye processing power and human pattern recognition. We're not just sharing technology anymore. We're sharing ways of thinking. As if to emphasize her point, a young Archean researcher approached their group, clutching a datapad nervously in 3 of their appendages. "Pardon, human Chen," they said, their translator conveying youthful enthusiasm. "But I had an idea about applying your chaos pattern recognition methods to gravitational field theory. It's not very orthodox, but—" Sarah grinned, recognizing the spark of scientific adventure in the researcher's posture. "The best ideas usually aren't. Tell me more." As she listened to the young alien's theory, Sarah caught her reflection in the dome's surface. Behind her, the stars stretched out to infinity, full of mysteries waiting to be solved. And now, finally, humanity's gift for embracing the unknown was being recognized as exactly what it was. Not a flaw to be corrected, but a strength to be celebrated. The galaxy, it seemed, was ready to start asking some very human questions about the nature of reality itself. And Sarah Chen, standing at the intersection of multiple species' ways of thinking, couldn't wait to help find the answers.